Have you ever heard of a victory so huge, so complete, that it ends up destroying the very empire that won it? It sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly the paradox we're diving into today. How Britain's massive triumph in North America directly lit the fuse for the American Revolution just over a decade later.
I mean, how does that even happen? You win a war and you lose an empire. It just doesn't seem to add up. Well, that's the central question we're going to unpack.
Okay, first things first, let's clear up some names. You might have heard of this war as the 7 Years' War, a massive global showdown between Britain and France. But over here in America, it was called the French and Indian War. And honestly, that name's kind of misleading. It wasn't France versus the Native American nations. Nope, it was Britain against France, and different tribes had to make a tough choice. They strategically sided with whichever European power they thought gave them the best shot at survival.
All right, so let's set the scene. We're talking about the mid-18th century here, from 1754 to 1763. And you got to understand, this was way more than just a little border skirmish. This was a fight for the future of an entire continent.
And the place where it all kicked off? It wasn't some grand European capital. No, the flashpoint for this massive war was this huge, untamed wilderness, the Ohio River Valley. Basically, a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
So why was this patch of land so incredibly important? Well, just look at this. It was a total collision course. For the French, this valley was the only thing connecting their territories in Canada all the way down to Louisiana. It was essential. For the British colonists, though, it was the future. It was the dream of westward expansion. And this is so important. For the Native American nations who actually lived there, it was their home. Their survival plan was basically to keep these two European giants locked in a stalemate.
So you can see a collision was pretty much inevitable. But the guy who actually lit the fuse, it wasn't a king or some general back in Europe. It was a young, super ambitious colonial officer you've probably heard of, a guy named George Washington.
And wow, did things escalate fast. In 1753, Washington basically shows up and tells the French, hey, you gotta leave. They, politely told him, no thanks. So a year later, he comes back with troops, attacks a French position, and gets totally defeated. He's forced to surrender. And that one little skirmish, out in the middle of nowhere, that was the spark that ignited a world war. Just like that.
What's really fascinating here is that even before the war really blew up, some colonial leaders saw the storm clouds gathering. Benjamin Franklin, for instance, proposed this really radical idea, a plan of union, to get all the colonies to act as one. It actually failed, and the irony? It failed because no colony wanted to give up its power to tax somebody else. But this was it, the very first draft, the first blueprint for what would one day become the United States.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. Britain wins. It's a stunning, massive victory. But this win, it came with a hidden price tag. Because during the fighting itself, Britain's own actions had planted these little seeds of resentment among the colonists, and they were about to sprout in a big way.
The Peace of Paris in 1763 completely redrew the map of North America. I mean, look at this. France was basically kicked out of the continent, gone. And Britain? They got a huge chunk of new territory, including the very prize they've been fighting for, the Ohio Valley. On paper, this was an absolute, total triumph.
But here are those hidden costs we talked about. To actually fight this war, Britain used some pretty harsh policies. Things like impressment, and that's literally just kidnapping colonists off the street and forcing them to serve in the Navy. And then there was quartering, forcing families to house and feed British soldiers in their own homes, at their own expense. Now, this wasn't just some inconvenience. To the colonists, this felt like pure tyranny.
And this right here, this is the real heart of the story. Britain's victory created two immediate, and as it turns out, disastrous problems that would lead them straight down the path to revolution.
The fallout from the war really boils down to two things: the land problem and the money problem. Both were a direct result of winning. Okay, so here's how the land problem played out. It's like a chain reaction. Step 1, the war ends and British colonists just start flooding west into that new territory. Step 2, this of course leads to violent conflict with the Native American nations who were already there, like the raids led by the Ottawa leader Pontiac. So, step 3, Britain tries to solve this by issuing the Proclamation Line of 1763, basically drawing a line on the map and telling colonists, you cannot settle west of the Appalachian Mountains. And the result? Step 4, The colonists, who felt they just fought and bled to win that exact land, were absolutely furious. They saw it as the crown controlling their destiny. Now for the money problem. And this number, well, it says it all. The cost of winning this war was so insane that Britain's national debt, it doubled. Just doubled. The government back in London was under unbelievable financial pressure. So this led to a very simple but explosive question back in London. The thinking was, wait a minute, we just fought an incredibly expensive war pretty much to protect the American colonies, so who's going to help us pay for it? And the answer to that question, well, it would set Britain and its American colonies on an unavoidable collision course. This is the road to revolution. And here was Britain's big answer. To pay off that mountain of war debt, Parliament decided to do something it had never, ever done before. It started imposing new, direct taxes on the American colonies. This was a complete and total change in the rules of the game. And that new policy? It immediately gave birth to the rallying cry that would define the entire next decade: taxation without representation. The argument from the colonists was simple. Since we don't get to elect any members to Parliament in London, Parliament has absolutely no right to take our money through direct taxes, period. And that right there, that's the key takeaway from all of this. This huge shift in policy, a shift that was born directly from the financial mess left by the French and Indian War, well, that became the main highway to the American Revolution. The victory over France had accidentally created the very crisis that was about to tear the British Empire apart.
And so that brings us right back to our original question. How can a victory destroy an empire? Because sometimes winning the war is the easy part. It's the consequences, the forces you unleash that nobody saw coming, that can change the world forever.